Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Gold Mine. I have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited to have Zach joining us. It's been a while. And of course, our good buddy Seb is here. Now, if you're excited, as you should be, what you should be doing is liking the show, subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell, doing all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, Wednesdays and Fridays. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all while we are going along, make sure you put them in the comment section and we can hit those up right away. We're going to be getting into Mentell.ca. We're going to be getting into the mental health walks that Seb has been putting on, as well as a number of other people that have been helping. And then we're also going to talk about Men's Mental Health Month, which is going to be a great setup. Now, before we get into it, let's get some intros out of the way. Zach, 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff.
Sure. Hey, I'm Zach. I'm from Calgary, Alberta, host of the Canadian podcast, and one of, I guess, the members of Mentell.
Hitting buttons. There we go. I like it. Seb, give us a quick little rundown.
Yeah, Seb Lavoie, 23 years combined service, a friend of the collective and the gold mine.
Bam. I like it. Sean, how's life out there while you take your first sip? Oh, you're still muted. Here we go. Nothing? Okay. We'll come back to you. Let him get his coffee in. Now, I want to get into this right away, so I'm not going to go too deep into anything. Zach, tell us about Mentell.
Sure. So Mentell, it was an idea for a few years, and I just couldn't figure out if I was ready or not to kind of execute on something. And last year, 2 weeks into June, give or take, Sean had seen a little post of it once and said, "Hey, man, I'm in, whatever you need." And I said, "Wow. Okay, well," I messaged Sean and I said, "What if I screw this up?" He's like, "So what? Who cares if you fall? Pick yourself back up. Let's go." And, sometimes it's all you need. And I was like, "All right, here we are. Let's try this out." So last year we got about, I would say about a few hundred men online and offline talking. This year, we obviously want to grow that, not just because of a metric or a number. It's more or less the impact. That's how we can gauge, are people speaking or not? And, we all know we can be in our own head. So why not try and get out there? So this year, it's been exciting to have you guys obviously as ambassadors, as always. And Sean spearheaded it and started off for us this year.
Well, let's get a thought on that, Sean. What are your thoughts on Mentell?
Well, that's kind of how I recall it as well. Zach he didn't reach out or he didn't hit me up. We were just chirping back and forth, and he had this idea, and I wasn't like trying to be Mr. Encouraging. I just knew that Zach was the right guy for the job and that he was going to do a great job, and that if he did have some blind spots, then the rest of us would somehow help him out. And so to that point, Zach hit me up a few days ago and said, "Hey, Mentell, June is coming up, and I'm kind of hoping that you can support the initiative again this year." I was like, "What? You talking to someone behind me right now? Of course I'm going to support that initiative. That is freaking guaranteed." And so Zach had asked me to put out a video just to kind of reference Mentell as kind of not to spearhead again this year. He just said, "Hey, between now and Tuesday, can you put out a video that is going to encourage people to kind of step up to the mic and speak up to other men?" And I said, "Sure will." And like within about 60 seconds, I was framing up, "Oh, that's going to happen ASAP." And so I think that's really my message, man. I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't think I had anything to say on the subject. I just freaking committed and hit send it. And I think that's what a lot of guys should really think about in my message right now is, if you think you got nothing to say, you do. And the only way to do it is to hit record and then send. And send it to Zach. Your thoughts on what it means to be a man today and how you can maybe help other men.
I like it. Seb, thoughts on Mentell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great initiative. Having a conversation is the point of Mentell. it's not about exactitude of wording or verbiage or whatever the case is. It's just having the conversations, because those are things that just weren't occurring, and everybody was isolated in their little bubble, thinking they're the only one going through certain things, and never having the conversation, and everybody displaying their best face forward, or for everybody to see. And so if you're trying to judge against something you don't know anything about, and you're invalidating yourself in the process of doing that on account of things that you don't even know, you're doing everything wrong. Like, talk about mental health, you're going to feed into that loop, massively. And so having initiatives like Zach's, and of course, there's too many people to count that have been poked by Shaun to do something in life. And I'm one of them. I think to a certain extent, all of us here are one of them, and there's plenty more where it's coming from. So I really like that. And if I was to go back in time and hear about what Zach was struggling with, I would have sent him to Shaun, because I know that what is coming out of that is exactly what should have come out of that. And so, the more we do it, and the more we have these conversations, and the more we make this not only about a month, but about a daily operation. This is kind of like the Remembrance Day issue, like once a year on November the 11th, I'm going to wear a poppy and I'm good to go. Hell, you shouldn't have a qualm about missing Remembrance Day if you're honoring veterans daily. Like, this isn't a thing. And so I think this is where we're going with this, is really normalizing the conversations, but also normalizing taking actions, because words are only as good as words are.
Yeah,
Those are my thoughts initially.
100%. Now, I want to get into anniversaries and things like that, because it's D-1 day right now, but D-Day tomorrow, right? And these anniversaries will come up, but we're going to get into that in a little bit. I want to ask.
Hang on a sec.
Oh,
With
what do
the
you got?
time change, so we're in a different time zone, of course. Because just before I came into this conversation, about 5, maybe 10 minutes before I came in, I just finished writing up a little post that I put up on my Instagram account. And the reason that I put it up is because when you do the time change, D-Day's kicking off. And so what I did do was I thought, what am I gonna say this year on the 80th? I mean, it's a big deal, and this could be some of the last veterans from that era that are alive to be there at the anniversary. And so not like anything I say makes a difference, but I wanted to reflect on it, and I wanted to give them a freaking solid nod, which is what I made an effort on. And the nod was along these lines. That was the great generation. Great men doing heroic things as warriors, stomping down on Nazism and saving the freaking European continent. It took a long time and a lot of loss. And because of that, some people out there nowadays in our modern world have forgotten what sacrifice means. They don't have the gratitude for the sacrifices made. They are so disconnected from that moment that they don't realize why that war was occurring. And so I put up 10 images in the post. And in those 10 images, if you fail to understand why 300 Pathfinders jumped out into the pitch black over Normandy to start setting up drop zones for 20,000 other paratroopers to jump in and liberate Europe, you're freaking totally the kind of person that I don't understand. Because when you look at those images, man, you'll see horror, you'll see evil. It's diabolical what is in some of those images that I put up, right from the Cayenne War Memorial, as I toured through it with my boys a couple of years ago. Because I wanted to, not only did I want to stand on the beaches and try to feel what those men felt, but I wanted to observe why they were there, the evil that they were there to defeat. And so with that in mind, I think every man, to some degree, is facing evil throughout their day, either in their minds or externally. We all kind of struggle with these dark forces. And so some men went and stomped out those dark forces, but then they came home with dark forces within them, with PTSD or with internal mental health struggles, till the day they died. And so as I was thinking about all of that, that's a lot of things to unpack, I know, but as I was thinking about all of that, it just made me realize that, some people struggle, but a lot of people don't know why. And it's because they don't understand what that man has seen. And so I wanted to like put people in those shoes today. And I think that's probably one of our jobs as well, is to try to understand the person who's struggling in front of us and put ourselves in their shoes to better understand why they're in the hurt locker and then how to help them.
That is a fantastic point. Seb, I'm going to come back to you. Any thoughts on that?
There's nothing really that's more difficult than placing yourself in a situation that you know nothing about. It's easier if you have relatable items, or if you've been there, or if you've have some sort of service, or if you've sacrificed on account of even a family member or anything. There is some relatability. What we're talking about here is the ultimate in a human experience. Let's call a spade a spade. I don't care who you are or where you're from. Combat operation on the scale of operation run during those campaigns is unmatched in intensity. It just is. I don't care what you do in life, you know. And this is not meant to invalidate all these other things. It's meant to remember that fundamentally none of those other things would happen had it not been for those sacrifices. It's that simple. None of them. And so you can sit there and be like, well, I did other things or whatever. It doesn't take away from you. It doesn't take away from it. Giving props where props are due does not take away from you. If every time you have to give somebody credit, you somehow your insecurities are flaring up, you got much bigger problems. You got much bigger problems to address. And so for me, it's all about giving credit where credit is due, having these plank holders never to be forgotten. In fact, we should learn more. The more time has passed since it occurred, we should make an effort to really dive deeper into their personal stories and their individual stories and passing them on, and not have nameless faces and those types of things, and understanding the campaigns and the intricacies around the campaigns, all of those things. What are we actually doing? Like, we're not doing much of anything at all. If you think about it, there is not much conversations going on. There is not much exploration going on. All of this needs to be brought to bear. All of this needs to be dominating social media. All of this needs to be, re-exposed, so to speak, especially in light of all those veterans leaving us. And I don't even know, Shaun, I don't think there's 10 left. I don't know. I don't know how many are left.
There's a handful left now.
Yeah.
And one just passed away over the weekend. He was on route to France. He had his health checked off. Everything was good to go. Fell asleep, didn't wake up. So, and he said, I went to the 70th.
He was 100 years old, I
Mhm.
believe. Hey,
Yeah. He went to the 70th, 75th, and his goal was 80th. I will go there. But, they said this is the last time they will all go there, because they're, I think, from the age of 99 to 100 and whatever now. So
This is a tough thing. And I think one thing that most people forget is that, you look at these images, you see the newsreels of D-Day and throughout the war and all these things, and people forget these are 18 and 19-year-old kids, right? Like, I remember being 18 and 19, and Storm of the Beaches of Normandy was not like on the top of my want to do list, right? But that was what was going on at the time. Conscripted, yeah, a lot of them.
For the most part, right? Like, and so now you're looking at people that were essentially told, and there is a difference, and I think it's important to point it out. There is a difference. If you make a choice, it doesn't negate the sacrifice, but it is different. If you make a choice to be a professional warrior, and that's the path that you want to walk down of, there'll be a lot of sacrifice associated with that. But you'll sort of preload that in your mind, because that's the path that you're engaging on. But imagine being an 18-year-old, and next thing you know, your name pops up on TV, and 3 days later you're on a boat to boot camp, and a month later you're out somewhere, in Europe, ready to go around and campaign. I mean, it's just unfathomable for people today, and I think that's the piece that's important. It's like, I want you to use all of your senses, all of your imaginary power, all of the things that you can relate to make this experience as close to real life as you possibly can for yourself. And I mean, what would it feel like? What would it sound like? What would it smell like to land on a beach with an enemy reinforced position opening up on you and your crew, and you're the sort of the you're the difference between freedom and oppression, but you're bearing the weight of that on 18-year-old shoulders, and now you're heading forward when every single bone in your body and everything about you is telling you to dig in and to hide because you want to see your loved ones again. Like, if you can't do that, you need to be able to do that. If you just dismiss it, it doesn't work. That's what happened. That's the reality of it. Deal with it. Like, think about it, honor it.
100%.
You know,
What do you got,
what I was gonna say is I wrote a list last night about a list of all the names that are remaining of these folks, these veterans, and if I can have the privilege of having them on the podcast, would you guys join me?
Yeah, of course. What kind of question is that? Of
Thank
course,
you.
absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
What would happen to the men after they would come home, and what was society like, you think?
I got so this morning, as like Seb's right, man.
Mhm.
Like, I'm a freaking Pathfinder, and I think I know a few things about what a Pathfinder is. But you know what I did this morning? I freaking spent an hour this morning revisiting the history of the Pathfinder units in World War II, based on it being D-Day, etc. And one of the guys I fixated on this morning, and I've forgotten his name, and it's doom on me, Shaun, for not remembering his name. But he was about 20, was he 25 or 26 years old? I just allocated him as, dang, he was in his mid-20s. And so he was one of the the U.S., because it was a multi-nation force of Pathfinders that jumped in to locate, mark, and secure the drop zones 1 hour before the 20-odd thousand paratroopers came in. And so this individual was the commander of the U.S. Pathfinder forces in his mid-20s. And he was, he's a bit of a legend, because everything he did and everywhere he was, he had a big old stogie sticking out of his mouth. Like, I looked at a photo of him in his jump helmet, like on frickin' D-Day, man. And he's got this big stogie sticking out of his gob. And he's like in his mid-20s. And that dude is so full of character in his mid-20s that he's got more character than, like, entire cities. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was just a freaking legend. And he was a legend because not only who he was internally, but how he'd chosen to externally execute against who he was internally. And so he had his stogie. He was leading the U.S. Pathfinders into Normandy. First American in Normandy. First one out of the plane, stick commander. Lands, does his thing, does some things, gets injured. Gets sent back to, not injured bad, gets sent back to England to brief the senior command, being one of the first Pathfinders. And he's got details, he's got to pass them on. And so they want him to stick around and do more briefings and become not quite a poster boy, but become a representation of U.S. forces in continental Europe. So what does he do? While he's in hospital, he ducks out. He sneaks out, jumps on a cargo ship, and slow hauls his way back into Europe, where he finds his boys again and starts frickin' hammering again. And so then he gets called in front of the head shed, where the commanding officer at the time this is what I read, took orders and put them under his nose and tore them in half and said, that was your promotion. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you out to another unit as punishment. And he got sent off to another airborne crew. And so what did that guy do? He just kept freaking hammering, man. And so at the end of the days, he's now back in America, and he's doing his thing, and he sees an advertisement in a newspaper, and it was from a fancy hotel, and they were claiming, listen, our deal is we look after veterans like nobody else. And so he wrote him a letter and said, well, if you look after veterans like nobody else, how about you look after me this way? And he wrote a list down to include what he wanted for breakfast. And that was how he wanted his eggs. He wanted his coffee made in the hotel room because he wanted to smell it as it was being cooked, in his words. And then he wanted lobster and steak and just a list of things that were like really extravagant and would have been difficult to produce at the time. But good on him. He went all in and held them accountable as to, we look after veterans more than anyone else. And so he put them to task, and they did. They met all of his requirements. And in fact, there's a photo of him. It's a great photo. I wish I could show it to you. Of him laying in bed in this hotel, this fancy hotel room, in his pajamas. And he's, I mean, he's living the life, man. But that's one day. He got one day of living the life on lobster. The rest of his days were spent in Europe, kicking ass and getting sort of the beat down. And so as I thought about all of that this morning, which I had no intention of talking about, otherwise I would have had his name written down, it reminds me of veterans or men who commit to a path to serve their country or serve their community. And then when it comes time for, we'll call it a nod or an attaboy or a pat on the back or some sort of way to recognize that year after year, it's typically only a one and done. It's not every year that you get a nod, and it's not every year that someone says, that was righteous, man. What you did for our nation was the right thing to do. And so now we're at a point in modern history where I know people who, if you mention you're a soldier or you were a soldier, like, you get a sneer or you get a frown or you get disrespected. And so over 80 years, how did it go from that to this? That's what was on my mind this morning. So to Seb's point again, no matter who you are, and no matter how much history you think you know, and how maybe you think you've got it all figured out, every freaking year on days like this, you should dive deeper to better understand what it's all about, what it means to you today.
This is a fantastic point, and it actually leads right into something that I just wrote down here. Is that to answer your question, Shaun? Why did it go from that to this? I think it has to do with the fact that we didn't talk about it, and like everything was compartmentalized to such a degree that, especially, I mean, I've told the story before, but my granddad didn't talk about the war his entire life up until I got back from Afghanistan, and even then, we only had one conversation about it. It's not something that generation discussed. And then on top of that, they just didn't discuss their problems, period. As a standard of being at that time, it just wasn't done. So I want to ask you guys your thoughts on that. Do you think that's the reason? Do you think that's correct? And on top of that, do you think that it's shifting now?
Well,
Zach?
I just want to ask
Go for
about your coping mechanisms. What was the coping mechanisms for them then? And then maybe we can transition to, like how things can be different and how we can be proactive.
Yeah, the coping mechanism back then was alcohol, basically across the board. Seb, what are your thoughts?
I think it runs a lot deeper than that. I think unfortunately, the closer you are to the enemy, the more people are willing to hear it, because there's no denying that the enemy was around.
Mm-hmm.
But after a while, you get to tell yourself a cute story that maybe it wasn't as bad, and maybe it was inflated, or maybe how could things possibly been as dangerous and treacherous and unfair and unjust and all of those things. Humans do fantastic when they can distance themselves for whatever adversity or predicament they're apprehensive about. I'll give you an example of this, a very personal example. How many people speak to me in the hot tub or in the steam room about my leg and how it happened? And generally, the conversation goes something like this: what happened and why? And then they get very, very interested in finding out exactly what happened to me. Not because they care about what happened to me. How do I How do I prevent this from happening to me? Right? So midway through the conversation, it's quite evident to me, depending who I speak to, and I'm not looking for sympathy or anything like that. So I'm totally good with the two conversations. I have no problem. It's just an observation I'm making. But most people are interested in your situation if you have faced adversity so that they can know how to react when it hits them. But when you start talking about things that are so extreme, and I've spoke about the intensity of the experience. Imagine having your entire lifestyle threatened by a force, by a military style force that can come in and you know kill you and your family and your kids and all this stuff. Most people will try to not think about that, as they will not think about crashing an airplane during a safety lecture, or they will not think about the safety brief in a CQB session, whatever. But the bottom line is this: I believe that the further away from a threat we find ourselves, the more we put our heads in the sand, and the more we try to pretend that it either wasn't as bad as it was, or that somehow we had done something to deserve that, because there couldn't possibly be that much evil, and there possibly couldn't be that much harm that can come to you on any given day. And this is where we're going wrong. And then when we start doing that, we start not listening, not being interested in going any deeper in the subject. The people that do talk often, find themselves hit with a wall, because most people will either, if they're really close family members or something, they might be really invested in the stories, but most of the time, it just simply wasn't the case. And then they're going to start justifying why they never rose up to that level of heroism. And that might be, well, I don't believe in government, whatever. I don't believe in politics. And this is all, you guys are all pawns or whatever. So now what they start doing is they start, again, putting their head in the sand and allowing themselves to give themselves excuses as to why they never needed to step up to that level. And now they discount everything that's been done before. And so the problem that we have is we sanitize the versions of the stories as it goes. And the more time is spent, the more sanitization is injected in there. And it's seeing the people that were responsible for making those calls, the people responsible for storming those beaches, as the ultimate process holder or process owners in this thing called saving the world. What are you talking about? I don't care if you weren't involved in a military campaign. I don't care if your family wasn't, by way of whatever, involved in service or anything. But the safety that we enjoy today, and all of the things that come along with that, are your responsibility as well as anybody else. So the very least, you're going to get to hear about it. You don't get to just walk and roam free and not know. And I will make a very quick transition to days where people would ask me, and some police officers get all bent out of shape when they're being asked, what is your worst call you've ever been to? And I'm like, oh no, now you get to hear it. Because you don't get to criticize all the time. You don't get to think that things should be done differently. You don't get to think that all the things that you have somehow are miraculously bestowed upon you. But what you do get to do is to participate in the community public safety, which is, at the very least, you will understand what we're doing and why. And when the time comes, maybe we'll have a little bit more support from you, or maybe you'll be out there keeping your eyes open, whatever the case may be. But it is a community responsibility, and that goes to war and the campaigns. And we didn't treat it as that. We send them out. We said, thank you for saving the day. Now, come over here and make sure that in 2 generations we don't hear about this again, because this was such an atrocious time in mankind history. Well, that was our biggest problem. We didn't do due diligence in bringing this to life daily, forever.
Yeah, 100%. Shaun, thoughts on? Oh, and Frank Lillyman.
That's it.
Fight Club repping on Instagram hit us up, and he was like, Frank Lillyman. I was like,
Frank,
oh, okay.
That's right. I wish I could have remembered. Hey, Chance, can you do me a favor, and can you pull up my post, please, that I put up this morning? And then I'd just like to highlight a couple of images in the post. There's 10 images in that post. And the reason that I want to do that is because some of those images will bring to bear the reality of why good men were diving out of perfectly good airplanes in the pitch black, a lot of them to their death. Out of the, I believe, 18 airplane loads that were dropped across Normandy, because there was so much flak fire coming in, the pilots were kind of, I don't want to say they were abandoning their mission, but they were throwing on the green light above the ocean so that an entire stick deployed into the ocean. They were diving too low at great speeds to get out of the flak and hitting the green light, and men were exiting out of the airplane at warp factor 3 and having their clothes torn off them, their weapons torn off them because of the velocity that the pilots were using to try to save their lives. And so, everyone like has the option as to what the cost is you're willing to pay in order for the greater good. And some individuals will choose to sacrifice the entire plane's worth of paratroopers so that they can save their singular life in that pilot seat. Now, I'm not in that moment, so I'm not judging the pilots. I'm not judging anyone. I'm just saying that, man, in these moments, there are no perfect answers. There's only sacrifices. Someone is going to sacrifice. So why were they sacrificing? Chance, can you just bounce a couple of images ahead here? So this first image, that image that is just back there, that is back in the 30s. And that is the onset of Nazism. The sign that he's hanging up, if you go to the next image, Chance, if you can read that, that's basically it's the onset of the problem that can invade the mind space of a continent. That is propaganda that is creating the stage for yet another invasion. That is the careful verbiage to convince that there's enemies within our population. And I don't want to make the too close of a comparison to what has occurred in our modern history, but a little bit of this goes on as well. Every single year around our globe. It's the verbiage, it's the propaganda that is created to divide us. But what are we being divided against? Can you bounce up another image, please, Chance? Onto the next one. Now, this image, take a look at that lady. She looks calm and comfortable and relaxed and put together. Now, read that verbiage. That is one of the female staff members that were responsible for kicking off basically the start of the extermination camps. It was these ladies that were involved in the T4 situation where they were learning ways to kill at scale in camps. This was the first crew. Can you bounce on to the next image, Chance? Check those ladies out. They're all chill and happy and looking like normal people. But to me, they're the epitome of evil. Like that, you wouldn't know. You could walk into a grocery store and all of those ladies could serve you and you wouldn't know that they are evil incarnate. They made a choice to destroy at scale other humans, but you wouldn't know it to look at them. That's our world, man. I mean, everyone is capable of this kind of stuff if you make the wrong decisions. And it's a slippery freaking slope. Every time you compromise, you're compromising towards that. And I know that that's an extreme moment, but that's what we all have within us. We have the ability to make the right choices. We have the ability to make the wrong choices. And you got to define, are you on the side of good or on the side of evil? Can you bounce forward another image, please, Chance? That's the one that I wanted to get to. If you can read that. The struggle is one of ideologies and racial differences and will have to be conducted with unmerciful harshness. That's Hitler. Those two young ladies that are hanging there, there's a backstory behind it. But that image should wake people up that some wars are justified and some aren't. Small conflicts perhaps aren't justified when you look at it through the lens of history 2, 3, 4 generations later. It's hard to scratch your head and see, why did we commit hundreds of thousands of men to their death? It's because of that. There's no good man that would allow that to happen on his watch. And so that is what D-Day is all about. But it's almost It's a moment where everyone gets to decide what the human race is all about and what side you're on. And as you're thinking about these kind of things, as a man, perhaps, if you've got struggles inside of you that feel a bit dark, it's time to talk to someone. No matter how dark or no matter how little, just talk to someone. You get something off your chest. If you're feeling that foreboding feeling, sit down and talk with a friend. Talk it out. Figure out what's going on in your head. And realize that as men, when we band together, we can band together for good as a band of brothers, or we can band together as evil.
Yeah. This is one of the points on this that I try to make pretty regularly is that this is not like it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen tomorrow, right? Like it's a matter of small choices over time that gets to this. Where, as you said, any good man shouldn't stand here and say like, what is even going on here? Yet there's 3 guys right in the foreground of that picture who was just like, yep, no, it's totally fine. And it's not. But those are, it's many, 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 many small decisions that led down that path to this happening. And on the flip side of that, when Canada and the United States and Britain and said, hey, this is not okay, we need men, people showed up in droves. There were lineups down the street at recruiting centers, but they still had to institute conscription at some point. But the point is that there were men that were willing to stand up and say, absolutely not, while there were other men standing there just totally being cool with it. So something I always like to bring up as a point as well. Seb, you were taking notes there. You got any thoughts on this?
Me always taking notes anyways, because I learn, right, as we go through these things myself. And so it's not always to address something. Sometimes it's just something I want to make sure that I focus on or hone on and remember. So there's 2 things that I want to bring to bear here. And when Shaun was talking about, we all have the ability to a certain extent to find ourselves being the oppressors. That's a fact. That's been proven time and time again. And that's the big realization when you realize that evil is as evil does. But when you realize that the people that are engaged in this are regular people, that is a terrifying prospect, right? And so if you look at the picture where the ladies are all lined up, it speaks to me in a way. And the way is who you surround yourself with. And we talk about that all the time. But who you surround yourself with is absolutely and incredibly powerful, to the point where it could take a person that has no evil propensity to the other side, in a matter of a few decisions away from doing certain things and finding themselves right in the darkness. And so we are tribal creatures, but we pretend we're not, and it doesn't work for us. And it becomes quite obvious that we're not when we attach ourselves to some tribes that are doing certain things just so we can have a certain feeling of belonging, so that we can feel value or valued rather. And so what is your circle doing? What is your circle? Would your circle be around filming, saying, oh, that's horrible, let me post this on the story? Or would your circle jump in and be the ones that will sacrifice it all to make a difference? That's a massive point. It has to be like that. And for me, when I look at my circle, I'm like, if everything that we know came to a screeching halt, and I had to rely upon 5 or 6 individuals, are those individuals in my circle currently? And the answer is always yes, period. And no hesitation, no anything, because that is who I surround myself with. They will never let me engage, even at the very basic level, in things that are not in line with the way we should be conducting business and life. And so I'll leave it at that. Your circle is important to the point where if you're in the wrong circle, you can become a person that you're not, right? And then the dehumanization factor, which is something that drives me absolutely crazy. And it's being done all the time. It's being done daily. It's being done by the left and the right and the political this and the political that. And it's being done by religion here and religion there. And it's being done by all kinds of people, dehumanizing other people to the point where they're no longer like you. They are different. They require extermination. They require to be dead. They require for their family to suffer. They're like, how do you get your brain to buy into this is a mystery I'll never understand, but I do get it. If you start chipping away slowly at somebody's humanity, one day, sooner than later, that person will no longer be human to you, and you will treat it as such.
Yeah, absolutely. Zach, you got any thoughts on any of this?
No, I'm agreeing with all of you guys on this, and yeah, just taking it in.
Raj, the interesting part about this, I think, is not only the dehumanization is that, well, actually, on top of that is the fact that it happens on a regular basis. You know, when we were going overseas to Afghanistan, it was very easy to fall into the dehumanization of what the enemy was, even though we didn't really know who the enemy was, right? And we had a general idea. I mean, it's similar in terms of the American and Canadian propaganda that was going on before World War II as well. Like, they were dehumanizing the enemy in order to make it easier to fight. But it's a mindset that requires acceptance, acquiescence. You have to buy into it. And if you buy into it, it's just another little step to buy in further and another little step to buy in further and so on and so forth. Both good and bad, right? Like, this is it's a morality question, but really, what choices do you want to make? I mean, we talked about this with Brad and Trav the other day. Was, you know, your choices matter, all of them, even though inconsequential ones that you don't think about. Shaun, you got any additional thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, just to play with what you said, which was right on point, and that is during that conversation, the philosophy of choice, we did touch on a lot of this, but, you know, it really comes down to some pretty simple things. And probably the most important thing, as Seb said, surround yourself with the right people. But what does the right people mean? It doesn't mean people that agree with you. It means the right people. And so there's certain ingredients in the right people. At least there is for me. The people that surround me. First, you got to be freaking cool. Second, you've got to be a critical thinker. And that means that anything that I say, you should be listening to and maybe immediately trying to disagree with. Not disagree with to be mean-spirited, but just don't take anything from anyone as gospel. What you should always do is question them and question yourself. It's a constant back and forth questioning process. I can be standing in front of someone listening to them, and whether I'm agreeing with them or not is neither here nor there. I don't have to say a word, but internally, I'm freaking incising everything they say. I'm using a scalpel on all of it. The stuff that's crap, gone. The stuff that's awesome, stuck over there. And the stuff that's right in the middle, whatever. I'm looking for the polarizing stuff, the amazing stuff, and the not evil, but the stuff that's absolute garbage. The kind of middle zone, I've just heard a lot of it over the years. And if it's a friend of mine, I'm interested. But if it's a passerby that I'm going to spend a minute with, I've heard most of the conversation before over the years. So what I look for critically is the extremes of who they are, because I've just heard all of the middle stuff over the years. And so it's really good and the really bad. That's how I start understanding people nowadays. But I think a lot of people out there consider the middle zone of what a person is saying. They will just have a regular conversation that flows, but they're not looking for the extremes of what's really amazing about this person and what is something that is concerning about this person. I don't think it's an art, or it's an art form of listening that isn't applied often enough, I believe.
To that point, sorry, Zach, I'm going to come right back to you to that point in terms of understanding what those people are and how they, you know, the extremes of their actions or what they talk about. I think it doesn't get thought about enough because people have not dealt with that level of evil in their own mind. As Seb said earlier, right? They don't really think about what it's like to crash in the airplane when someone is giving the briefing. They don't really think about how evil people can be when they're having a conversation with somebody in the shopping mart line, right? Where they possibly should. Zach, what do you got?
No, I agree with you, and that's kind of what I was going to base it on and build up on is, that picture, Sean, again with the women, and you see them all lined up. How do you know who's good for you? I mean, I'm not talking about just physicality. How do you aren't naive to the situation, because kindness can have a mask, as we all know.
That's a
So
good point.
the ride or dies, of course, you heard that, but that's just the base levels. How do we build on that?
What do you think, Sean?
Well, I think that it comes down to you've got to have context, of course. And again, back to that conversation of the extremes of listening to someone, the kind of maybe looking for the evil and looking for the God in a person, we'll call it. And so that middle ground is where a lot of people operate. And so there's never any determination as to what's this person actually about. Because we're all kind of the same. We can all communicate. We all have common words. We all kind of, everyone talks about the weather and sports and this and that. And so we have 1,000 words that we will exchange. And none of those words will have touched the two extremes of the devil and the God in us. And so we never actually look at a person as to who are they in this moment and what are they capable of, which is a way to understand these moments. Now, if as the photographer, if I was the photographer taking a photo of those ladies and observing them, what that photo represents is a 1-second moment in time. And what none of us got to observe is how those ladies interacted as they were lining up for the photo, how they were walking towards that building, how they, once the photo was taken, how they turned and looked at each other and disassembled themselves as they walked off to their taskings. None of us get to see that. We only get to see that one moment in time. And so it's all those little telltale signs before that moment. And it's all the little telltale signs after that moment that I look for. You can't really see it in the photo unless you've got a really keen eye. But what you can see it is in the moments before and after the photo. And so what you've got to do is pay attention to these moments, not like on a blip, one second image. Every day is a movie that you're paying attention to, not a photo that you're paying attention to. So it's these little indicators. Someone says something a little off-putting, and you kind of do, this is what I do in my mind when someone says something that kind of makes me, what? I'll give it one of those. I might raise my eyebrow, but inside my head, I'm raising my eyebrow at them. But they'll see a poker face, and that's what I think we're supposed to do, is observe the world with an occasional eyebrow every day, so that you can tease out the concerning moments. Because if you're not looking for concerning moments in your day, then everything is just a freaking flat line. Everything's good around me. See that lineup of ladies over there by the building? Looks like they're going out for a picnic. You miss all of the signals, man. You've got to look. And I know this is I'm not putting this together as a, I'll just say it. The devil is in the details. And so teasing out the details in life is a chore. It's a task. It is homework that you have to do every single second. To tease out the details, you've got to be constantly looking for details. Otherwise, you're not good at details. You're just good at observing a generally vague, muddy picture 24/7. All of us are capable of seeing the reality of the moment, but we have to do it every single day. It is a practiced art. You have to use your Mark 1 eyeball, maybe a sniper eye, to observe the world around you with not concern, but with a critical analysis in order to understand, is this good or is this bad?
Absolutely. Seb, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that is all extremely valid and super powerful stuff. Like one of the things that I wanted to touch back on, Chance, is a bit in relation to the question you were asking earlier about the returning home, right? And since it ties into this mental health sort of month and daily operation, one of the things that there's a few things I'd like to address. A, humans are going to disappoint you, period. Okay, so deal with that. Humans are going to disappoint you. And the reason why that is they're going to disappoint themselves, right? And so I'd be arrogant to expect everybody not to disappoint me, as I would be arrogant to expect to never disappoint anybody. And so as long as we understand that there are ways through things, and depending how egregious the offense is, so to speak, right? There's generally a way through things. For me, when it comes to my circle, I have a tendency to be very attentive, and through the little things, the person establishes where they are in relation to me, right? Like how loyal are they? How capable are they to telling me when I'm going off? How confident are they? All of those things. And so eventually, as you're gathering more and more intelligence about the person and the way they act and the way they portray themselves in relation to your relationship, you're able to really ascertain who's your ride or die. But it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of engaging in life with that person to understand that. At the end of the day, if somebody, as Shaun alluded to earlier, if somebody disappoints me at some point, what are the goods that I've taken from from that person so far? And if this is a catastrophic situation here where we're gonna have to make some hard calls and perhaps split ways or whatever the case may be, what have I gained, and what does that person gain as a result of this relationship? This is not lost. Relationship will start, they will end. That's just the way the life goes. But we want this feeling of comfort where nothing is going to come to take this comfortable spot away from me. Well, you should be the one seeking to take that comfortable spot away from yourself. Aside from that, it's guaranteed that life will be doing that for you at some point. And so that is kind of how I go about the circle piece. Is are they in line in terms of values and things that are important to them? Are they selfless? Are they, in for themselves, or whatever the case may be? So those are all questions that I answer along the way, and I will wait to see the corroboration of that in their actions, not in my perception, because that's a very different piece. Now, one thing, just to go back, Chance, to what you were saying earlier about the return. So let's compare two demographics, right? World War II veterans and Vietnam, for example. And this is a classic case of sanctuary trauma. This is a classic case of World War II veterans, for the most part, were seen as liberators. This was the most, sort of value return from society to our veterans that's ever occurred in almost any war. And then you have Vietnam, which was a complete opposite of that, a political, issue, going along with the campaigns, but then a completely unsupportive public, and then people coming back being accused of this, that, and the other thing, and the hippie movements there at the same time, and all of those things. Those are perfect storms, but to me, there's a symptomology of something worse, because the PTSD and occupational stress injury rates during Vietnam were astronomical as a result of that. People returning to where this should have been a safe place, but it isn't, because those people turned on me. My people turned on me. They're accusing me of this, and that. Horrible, horrible predicament. Whatever you think about the Vietnam War, the soldiers didn't make the decisions. They went and did the work. So this ties into that constant need for external validation. And as you're embarking on those mission, on those personal journey, maybe of sacrifice, or the things that are going to be less than popular, take policing in 2024, for example, right? A lot of people call me and they're like, why would anybody want to be a cop in this day and age? I'm like, what does that have to do with anybody else? Like, why are you worried about the perception of cops by other people to decide whether or not you want to do what's right in for you and what you feel is right by society? And so again, it's understanding that the things that we do and the sacrifice that we make, dude, like, I don't care how righteous it is. 5 comments down, it will start going down. I'm talking about social media here, obviously, but 5 comments down, it will go down a rabbit hole, and you're going to be a completely different human. You're going to be evil. You're going to be all those things. And so if you start hanging your hat on these little things, your mental wellness is going to suffer incredibly. And so you have to have the ability, the inner strength, the fortitude, all of those things to realize, am I doing what I think is right in light of the totality of the circumstances after conducting a critical analysis? If the answer is yes, then you must live with that. And you must anticipate that you're not going to get validation from anybody else. You must realize that those that haven't done their homework are going to come out and be, on the other side of the spectrum. All of those things you need to do. And so you can regain some form of control over coming back and being completely obliterated by everybody. And this, again, not putting down the victimhood mentality on the veterans that came back, but plenty of them had it, because plenty of humans have it, right? And so those are all things that if you understand how powerful you really are, once you fully understand why you are doing what you are doing, and you're capable of articulating it to yourself and feel extremely comfortable with that, provided that obviously it's the right thing to do. If you feel very comfortable with super weird things, well, that's where your circle comes into play, right? To tell you that you're completely off the mark. But I think we really need to bring some of that power back to ourselves to address the things that we're gonna, go through in life, adversity mainly.
Yeah. This, I want to say thank you first off, Seb, because you just crystallized something in my head like perfectly. And I just want to explain it real quick. So, one of the things that my granddad told me when we were having our conversation after I got back from Afghanistan, I was playing I guess I was trying to like compare and contrast what it was like, the differences, and so on and so forth. And I was like, I can't even imagine walking across Europe. First off, like that's crazy. No armor, no armored vehicles, out in the bush, just doing the job. And the one thing he said to me was, "Yeah, but at least I knew who I was fighting." And it just like, dang. And he eventually went on to say that, that he really respects the soldiers that went out in Vietnam, especially, and then Afghanistan as well, just in the fact that, if he saw somebody in gray uniform, sweet, like it's who you're fighting versus not. But what crystallized in my head there, Seb, was the fact that the people that do their homework, they're the people that take the time to critically assess their environment and their circle and what they need to do in life in order to better themselves or to work through the problems they're having, is they need to know who to fight. And once they know who they are fighting, which is usually yourself or the dark thoughts in your head or any of those things, then it streamlines everything. It crystallizes it for you. So, okay, that's what I'm going to mess with. I'm going to get rid of that. And then just hammer into it until it's no longer an issue. So I appreciate you crystallizing that thought for me, because that it all came together while you were talking. I appreciate that. Now, Zach, I want to ask you this question before we run out of time. With Mentell and all the work you've been doing there, and all the stories you've heard, and all the men you've talked to, what's the big connection of it all? What's the thing that you've noticed that has really brought all of these stories and all of these pieces into one thing, if you can do it?
For sure. I think one person resonates with another and not. And the good thing about this is it's a domino effect. It's the pebble thrown, that ripple effect where, that one message might resonate with someone, and it doesn't matter who it is. So you could say something, or that person could say something, and I say, I'm going to try that, and I'm going to apply it to my life. And it may work, it may not, but guess what? I can move on and try something else. So definitely the ripple effect, the domino effect of it, where it's empowering one another. From what we're seeing is guys are feeling comfortable talking because of others. And it's interesting. It just takes that little tip. But it's all of this that we're talking about, these conversations behind the scenes to get to where we are today. So Yeah, I'm proud. There's a lot of work, of course, but it's a start. I'd rather be proactive than reactive in this situation. There's a lot of resources out there for, oh my God, after this happens, or what could have changed? What could I have done different? Well, here we're starting it at the collective here at Mentell. So to start.
Yeah, love it. Now we are just over an hour right now, and I can't thank you guys enough for this conversation. It did not go anywhere near where I thought it was going to go, but I think way better than where I thought it was going to go. So I really wanted to thank you guys, Zach, Sean, Seb. Just an amazing conversation. I think we hit on so many points, and I do believe we could probably sit here and talk about this all day
Oh yeah.
without much of an issue. So, but I'm going to have to call it right now. So let's get some final thoughts on anything that we talked about. Men's mental health in general, D-Day, anything. Zach, let's start with you. We'll work our way down.
Well, hats off to all the veterans. First off, I agree. We need to talk about it. They can't be nameless, faceless. We need to share their stories. Most important. Secondly, if folks haven't heard about D-Day or don't know much about it, take the time, watch some stuff. It's all available, YouTube, everywhere. And in terms of Mentell, keep up the good work, everyone. I think we're onto something here. So let's keep pushing. The Canadian Mental Health Association has reached out now, so that's a good way to partner up versus last year. So again, 1%, 2% better year after year, and that's all I'm looking for right now.
Outstanding. Seb, final thoughts?
Yeah, two things. So let's talk about fight, right? Like if you think about a fight and everything that you come up against is automatically an adversary, and now it's a fight. You imply that there's a winner and a loser, and it's a clear cut line and all those things. And that's fallacy when it comes to mental health. I have dark cloud days all the time, like all the time. Like wake up in the morning feeling super anxious, being in a rut, doing all this thing. The difference is like, yeah, that happens. Boom. What am I doing about it? Okay, I'm out in nature. Okay, I'm training. Okay, I'm doing this. Okay, I'm planning a project. Okay, I get on a podcast. All of those things. And so the difference is, it's not that it's not happening to me, is I know exactly where I'm going when it does. And so when it comes to fighting, it makes it sound like somehow you get a side of you and another side of you that are not working together. They're working against each other, and you're trying to prevent them from impacting the other side. It's not how this works. It's just not how this works. That's not what it is. It's not an actual fight. It's not a fight in that proper sense of the word. And so not everybody needs to a win or a loss. Sometimes it's just an acknowledgement, and right on by it goes, right? Let these dark thoughts and the things that are creeping into your mind flow. Stop trying to stop them. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. You'll never stop all the darkness to come into your life. That's a fact, either from an external perspective or an internal perspective. But what you do when it happens is what's important. A little bit of grace and a little bit of movement forward. Where am I doing? What am I going with this to make this a little bit better? And next thing you know, you'll be out. But try to stop it completely, and you're going to spend your entire life to try to stop something that you absolutely cannot stop. It's impossible. You can't. You can mitigate, you can help, you can do all those things. Okay. So first thing. The second thing is in relation to what Zach said when he spoke about taking the time to learn. That's a gross understatement. There is so much to learn, but it's valuable. It's meaningful. And guess what? You get to teach it to your kids. You get to teach it to others. You get to teach it to people in conversations here, there, and everywhere. I mean, it's everybody's responsibility to keep the story of those men alive. It's our job collectively, nobody else. Don't look around for historians to keep this together. Don't look at Hollywood to have all the movies that we need. Like, just think about how simple it is. We just need to continue proliferating the message, and do so meaningfully.
Yeah, 100%. I appreciate the clarification on that. And you're absolutely right. Sean, final thoughts?
Yeah. There's good and evil in every man, and it's your job to understand that, critically analyze what side you are on. And Seb is right. It's not a win or loss. It's not a you're either good or you're evil. We're all of it at the same time in a soup bowl that constantly gets stirred every 24-hour cycle, where you get to observe the ingredients. And if you want to be on the right side of history, if you want to be on the right side of your community, if you want to be on the right side in your head, y'all know what side you got to be on. Choose good, man. And so no matter what's going on in your mind, in your life, choose good. There's lots of good around you. And it's your job to identify maybe not the beacons of hope or the beacons of light, but go identify good men who can help guide you towards the light. And I think a lot of people imagine those men as a stogie chewing, first in the door, diving out of a plane over a foreign country in the pitch black into the unknown to go kick ass. That's what some men imagine as the hero. You're the freaking hero, bro. We all are. The only reason that you're not diving out of a plane right now with a stogie in your mouth is because you just haven't realized that that's who you are. Go be it. Don't talk about it. Be about it. You want to be a hero? You want to help people? You're already it. Just get to work. Go find a frickin' stogie and start practicing your jumps.
I love that. The only thing I have to add on this is the fact that if you really want to learn more, there, like Zach said, and Seb said, there's so much information out there, especially on D-Day. That it's a big date. There's a lot of information there. But if you've never really talked about it, you've never heard about it, you've never really just kind of like D-Day, I know like we talked about it in school, there are a few resources that I think you should look at immediately. First one is the first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan. That would probably be the biggest one. Because, and I say this specifically, most movies I'm not a big proponent of just going to see as a military experience. But there were veterans of D-Day that watched that movie and said, that's about as close of an approximation as you're going to make. So take that in light, as well as Band of Brothers. Same deal when they did D-Day as well. Dunkirk, things like that. There are specific movies that really portray it to such a high degree that veterans that were there agreed, said, yeah, okay, that's about as close as it gets. So those three, I would say, as a pure recommendation for anybody that wants to learn more about it. That's the first step, if you haven't seen those already. Secondly, just as we've been saying, go do. You want to learn more? Go learn more. You want to talk to a vet? Go talk to a vet. Don't think about it. Don't hum and haw over it, or what would I say, or how would I act? Just go. Talk. Go from there. That's what I believe Mentell is about. That's what I believe, the mental health walks are about. That's what I believe the collective and the gold mine is all about, is getting the conversations started. And then we'll see what happens from there. So again, I can't thank you guys enough. It's been a fantastic conversation, and I will hope to see you next time as we all continue to learn, build, and grow. Chimo, everybody.
Chimo.